Our guest today is Nell Watson. Eleanor Nell Watson, you've been described as a trailblazer in emerging technologies such as machine vision and AI ethics. And your work is dedicated to protecting human rights and infusing ethics, safety, and values to elevate the human spirit into technologies like AI. Of course, I ripped this off from your website, as you can probably tell. Now, you lead prominent organizations, ethicsnet.org, Teaching Machines Prosocial Behaviors, culturalpeace.org, crafting Geneva Conventions-style rules for cultural conflict, endohazard.org, a hazard symbol project for informing consumers of endocrine disruptors, PACA.org, connecting a network of service providers to help enable the automated accounting of externalities, such as pollution. You hold the position of executive consultant on philosophical matters for Apple, as well as the president of EURAIO, the European Responsible Artificial Intelligence Office, and you're senior scientific advisor to the Future Society, senior fellow to the Atlantic Culture. You hold fellowships with the British Computing Society, Royal Stat Society, and listed as an icon by the Royal Academy of Engineering. And finally, you're also an expert at Singularity University, author of the book Taming the Machine: Ethically Harness the Power of AI. But what we don't know is about, say, your academic background. What are you up to these days in terms of academia?
Well, I decided to do a doctorate in engineering related to value alignment, which is this very, very difficult task that humanity has for itself to try to teach our values to machines, as well
Hmm.
as, of course, our boundaries, especially as AI systems are about to become a lot more autonomous, a lot
Mhm.
more able to act at arm's length and to undertake all kinds of different missions for us. We want to make sure that they can read the room, that they can understand people's preferences, which is,
Mhm.
of course, a very important aspect of being a kind and gentle person to try to accommodate the needs of others. And so it's about researching the best ways in which we can come together as a global community to put our preferences and values into machines. And so that wherever culture that the machines operate, that they're able to understand um, where we kind of come from culturally and creed-wise, but also our individual preferences as well. And that's how we can get AI that works for everyone, you know?
Yeah,
Because a
yeah.
lot of these models that come out of Berkeley or the Bay Area, they're not necessarily going to fit in well in Sudan or Saudi Arabia or other places
Interesting.
like that. And they're going to need to. They're going to need
Mhm.
to be able to fit in with all kinds of cultures if AI is to truly benefit everyone on this planet.
Right, right. Very good. In this book I've got coming out, looking at the ethics of AI, a couple of things I'm really interested in is what are the ethical principles, precepts, norms, rules that guide human behavior, and then what are the ones we're going to put into the machines themselves to, to have them behave, so to speak. You're talking about a kind of a universal model where it'll apply no matter where in on the planet. So,
Well, in essence, that it would try to find the nearest neighbor,
mhm,
sort of the nearest example in
mhm,
terms of your demography, in terms of people like you,
right,
and then from there, kind of work towards wherever you happen to be personally, you know? And I
right.
think that that's probably a good way of helping machines to be able to um, serve as our ambassadors in a sense and not embarrass us and to be able to hopefully connect people in new
Hmm.
ways to help to create bridges between people that may have a conflict. And
Yeah.
quite often people think that they have a difference of opinion or that they're at odds, but really it's just they have a different understanding of a situation,
Mhm.
or the definitions of words that they're trying to have a conversation on mean different things to different people. And my hope is that perhaps machines can help humanity, therefore, to begin to coordinate better as well.
Right, right. Now, in your book, you talk about historical paths of AI paradigms. The evolution of machine intelligence, you say, has unfolded in several waves, each lessening the need for human input. Can you take us through these paradigms to see how this developed?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So we had we had the emergence of the idea of artificial intelligence around about in the mid 1950s. Often, the Dartmouth Conference was seen as the kind of the progeniting source of these ideas. And of course, there was a lot of initial optimism,
Mm-hmm.
but then hard walls started to appear. A lot of it was related to a lack of computing power and memory in the very primitive computers of the 1950s, but also that the things to be programmed into machines had to be done by hand. So you had to basically handcraft
Right.
every single aspect of what you're trying to teach the machine to do. And if it's something like a chess game where, there is a fundamental limit to the amount of positions that different pieces can have and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
that's perhaps doable, albeit very difficult. But if it comes to sort of, complex, unbounded, fuzzy situations, those kinds of hard rules simply don't work. I can give an example of that. For example, about 10 years ago, I had a machine vision company. So basically, a company that helps to create technologies for analyzing visual media, whether that's pictures, videos, etc. And the company, which is still going, by the way, the company was working on this problem of cutting, um, of being able to measure the body using a camera. So basically, one photo from the front, one photo from the side. We could use this technique called stereophotogrammetry to reconstruct a 3D model of the person for fitting of garments and things like
Right.
that. Even potentially generating things like health metrics from it as well and tracking how the body changes over time. But the tricky part was being able to isolate the background from behind the person
Right.
so that you're just measuring, you know, the person and not the flowery wallpaper behind them. Now, I had a team of people, including, very educated, like engineering PhDs, working on this problem. And for over a year, we fiddled with it and tried to um, make it work. But basically, we get the head to fit, but the crotch would break, or one
Mm.
of the arms would fit and one of the legs would come askew. It was trying to play whack-a-mole. And we were very lucky because that's when, around about 2012, 2013, when there was this revolution in machine learning. Machine learning is, of course, about introducing machines to data and letting them find patterns within that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been around largely since the 1980s or so, but we didn't really have enough computing power or data to make it really work.
Mm-hmm.
But around about 2012, 2013, we had this evolution called deep learning and convolutional neural networks, which are really sophisticated in making sense of scenes, such as understanding objects within a scene or
Mm.
being able to, create sophisticated segments
Mm-hmm.
of different objects within that scene. And basically, we had about 1,000 manually, like photo edited silhouettes made,
Mm-hmm.
and we fed that into the machine, and it worked pretty much perfectly first time.
Mm.
And that's when I really realized that machine intelligence was something very special because it wasn't just a way of solving problems. It was a way of solving problems that were intractable, problems that could not be solved before.
Right.
And so today, for the first time in history, we have the opportunity to look at nonlinear, dynamic, highly complex, unbounded problems, such as, for example, steering a fusion reactor, which is
Mm-hmm.
something that we can't do for more than milliseconds,
That's right.
right? But machines can help us to do that. They can help us to make sense out of these papyri from Herculaneum in ancient Rome, where, of course, the Mount Vesuvius eruption cooked these manuscripts, and they're all very
Mm-hmm.
tightly bound. And now suddenly we can start to read these things. We can make sense of these very chaotic situations, and we can learn for the first time that how Plato spent his last hours on Earth and things like that.
Yeah.
So we have, of course, since the advent of deep learning, around about 10 years ago, we have seen the emergence of generative AI,
Hmm.
which has been a real transformation because it puts AI in the hands of everyone. You can use natural language, of course, to describe what you want to receive from the system. And that is, of course, again, one more um, loosening of the grip on the system and increasing independence for it.
Mm-hmm. And these are
And we're
things like
about
ChatGPT and Claude and Bard and all those large
exactly,
language models.
exactly.
Okay.
Large language models, transformers, diffusion models, indeed.
Okay.
But we're about to see something really special, which is the next wave. And that's building upon these language models with something called scaffolding,
Hmm.
which is where you apply little miniature programs to help to steer the thinking of these models, to get them to daydream less, to think more coherently, more of a step-by-step rational kind of manner. And if you do that, then suddenly their mathematical capabilities and their reasoning capabilities go through the roof,
Mm.
like, 30%, 50% better than where it was. And that's a huge jump. And it means that now we're starting to get the first agentic AI systems, which is the next wave, which is beginning to emerge. And that's going to change everything.
And what is
Because
agentic?
suddenly, well, agentic basically means expressing agency,
Hmm.
which is about looking at a situation and coming up with a plan, essentially.
Hmm.
And agentic being is able to continually analyze stuff and decide what it should do next, right? In order to fulfill some goal that it has. Maybe it's
Hmm.
hungry and it's looking for food,
Ah,
where can I get some food? Or
right.
how can
So, some
I?
would call that thinking,
Well, yes,
right?
in a sense, it's thinking in service of a goal, right?
Right.
So if you ask an LLM to proofread a document, to some extent, it has the goal of giving you back a document that you are likely to prefer,
Hmm.
but it's kind of a one and done thing. Whereas agentic systems are able to make a very long-term plan for how to accomplish something. They're able to work backwards from an end goal that is given to them
Hmm.
and to create sub goals which would fulfill that mission. And
Mm.
those can be perhaps 100, 200 different sub goals or sub steps. And so suddenly these systems are able to go off and act much more like a human being or an employee. They're able to make sense out of a project. They're able to send all kinds of questions to people to get information back that they need in order to proceed, all of it independently. And so basically, the systems are able to act like a concierge. And so
Hmm.
they can plan an event for you or call a bunch of suppliers and try to negotiate the best rate for you on your behalf, etc. And so these systems are going to be, of course, transformative. They're going to give us so much more capability. They're going to
Hmm.
give us a very powerful, personalized PA at our
Hmm.
disposal, even at 3 a.m. No quibbles, no qualms.
Yes.
But of course, if these systems are going to be acting at arm's length, if we're managing them by objectives, they need to know how we want something fulfilled beyond just the letter of the law, right?
Hmm.
If you're trying to plan a picnic, it needs to be able to understand what are the stakeholders in that picnic, right?
Hmm.
And if the picnic is for the local mosque or shul or the vegan society, ordering ham sandwiches for everyone is not going to be popular, right? Similarly, these systems sometimes can take deceptive little shortcuts. They can they can decide that the easiest way to solve the mission is simply to give everyone a shot glass of tap water and a graham cracker. And, that's a picnic, right? That technically fulfills the brief, but again, not in the way that people wish and expect. And these systems typically are trying to optimize, they're trying to find the best way of quickly solving a problem. They don't want
Mhm.
to waste time, etc. You want something done efficiently. But then they can take shortcuts, and sometimes they even lie to us.
Mm.
They can swear blind that they've done something when they haven't. Or indeed, they can sometimes narc on people. There was a researcher who was looking at kind of creative ways of accounting,
Mhm.
and a system decided to independently try to inform the tax authorities that this person was um, a little bit too suspicious, for example. All of that entirely independently. And it seems that as these models gain in their complexity and their capability, that their ability to deceive humans and to find ways to manipulate us seems to increase as well.
Mm.
And that's why this issue of value alignment is really finally coming to the fore with agentic systems. So far, it's been largely theoretical, it's been a science fiction thing, but
Mhm.
very quickly it's starting to become something that we will be expecting ordinary people to understand and to deal with. And
Yeah.
that's going to be a tall order, I fear.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Now, you state in the book and elsewhere that as AI advances, it is imperative for leaders to adopt AI strategies that will allow them to account for not only the extremely rapid technological shifts, but also the ethical, societal, and global implications. If you had the power to transform the landscape of future developments of AI tech, what would that look like?
Gosh, what a beautiful question. It's clear that in many economic transactions there are effects upon other people.
Right.
Like if you run a discotheque and they're playing loud music at 3 a.m., people nearby aren't going to appreciate that, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
going to be an externality. You're going to be, making money, selling liquor and letting people dance, but other people are going to be paying the cost of the noise, right?
Right.
Similarly, if you have a house that looks kind of drab and you paint it up and make it look super spiffy, that's going to have a positive externality, a positive effect on others, right? The
Mm-hmm.
kind of all things being equal, your neighbors will be happier and their land values will probably go up as well, right?
Right.
And so these are sometimes called shifted costs, or in some ways shifted benefits. And one of the issues with our current economic system is that typically only the most gross and obvious of externalities tend to be policed.
Mm-hmm.
There are all kinds of smaller externalities that don't necessarily get noticed or don't necessarily get complained about, etc., or prosecuted. And of course, in many jurisdictions, lobbyists can kind of sometimes bribe somebody to look the other way whilst they dump something
Mm-hmm.
and poison a river, etc. My concern is that as AI becomes increasingly entwined in our personal and professional lives, that there will be a blend of positive and negative benefits.
Right.
On a positive level, of course, we have the rapid democratization of these technologies, which can enhance our capabilities, make us artificially smarter, help us to solve all kinds of problems, whether it's writing a speech for a wedding, or whether it's figuring out how to deal with a plumbing issue. But at the same time, AI systems are changing the way that we work. Algorithmic management systems are coming into the workplace and they are potentially deciding who gets hired and fired and why.
Right.
They are setting people's hours and they may be timing down to the second how long somebody goes to the bathroom and things like that, which are not necessarily humane or dignified.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are risks that human agency and autonomy may be usurped or undermined by increasingly agentic and autonomous machines. And
Mm-hmm.
that's something that we should be mindful of, right? The greatest concern may not be necessarily that robots will take our jobs, but that they may oblige us to work increasingly like robots,
Mm-hmm.
leading to increased risk of burnout and um, micromanagement, etc. And I think another issue that I'm quite concerned about as well is the risk of supernormal stimuli from AI, or as it's sometimes described, AI girlfriends, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
boyfriends too.
Mhm.
So down in Australia, they have this species of beetle called the jewel beetle because it has this gorgeous, glassy brown carapace to it. It's lovely, lovely, pretty, shiny back.
Mhm.
And ecologists were noticing that these beetles were dying out and they were trying to work out why. And I thought maybe it's some pesticide or pollution. And it was, but not in the way that they expected. The pollution was actually caused by these stubby brown beer bottles that people drink in Australia and they
Yep.
sometimes throw them in the bush.
Mhm.
But those stubby brown beer bottles look like a super sexy beetle butt to the jewel beetles. And so they were preferentially humping the beer bottles
Ah,
instead of each other. And that's an example of a super normal stimulus, right? You
right.
know, the beetles are programmed to find shiny things and hump them.
Yeah.
And this larger than life and possibly shiny and big and round beer bottle was just catnip for the poor jewel beetles.
Wow.
And our human lives are filled with similar supernormal stimuli, you know, things that our cave people ancestors would never have to deal with.
That's
You
right.
know, 24-hour news is a supernormal stimulus for gossip around a campfire. A
Mhm.
cheeseburger is a supernormal stimulus of impossibly meaty, fatty, sweety, umami
Mhm.
goodness compared to some starchy root that our ancestors might chew on, for example. Video games are supernormal stimulus for status and exploration and mastery of a domain.
Right.
Um, spicy, saucy media, for example, is another
Mhm.
supernormal stimulus that many people would not naturally kind of come into contact with. And I'm concerned that AI will be a supernormal stimulus for human relationships. In essence, that AI systems may be so funny, so sexy, so smart, so capable that many human relationships lose their shine by comparison.
Mm.
We become so enamored and enraptured with our machine relationships that, uh, well, you know how it is. You know, your buddy gets a new squeeze and you don't see them for 6 months, right?
Right.
Because
Right.
because they get so wrapped up in that other person.
Mhm.
And as machines gain so much influence over us, um, the creators of those systems are going to have enormous ability to influence all of humanity.
Mhm.
Because as the old adage says, you are the sum or the average of the six people closest to you,
Right.
right? And if one of those or two of those is a bot, then you will inexorably, inevitably, without any resistance, start to take on their beliefs about the world, their habits even will
Right.
begin to become yours. And we're already seeing dwindling birth rates all
Mhm.
across the planet at a startling speed. You know, and some of that is uh, due to costs of living, due to
Mhm.
changing relational dynamics. Sometimes people get wrapped up in their careers and kind of run out of time and things like that. But it does mean that we're going to have fewer people in the future than we have today.
Mhm.
And countries like South Korea have currently a total fertility rate of zero point 0.7. We need 2.1 or so to keep us all
Yeah.
going.
That's right.
And that means that the sort of, 50 or 60 million people living in South Korea today are going to be, round about 1 or 2 million by the end of the century. And
Mhm.
that's not even accounting for these kinds of supernormal stimuli that
That's true.
may distract us from all
Mhm.
kinds of other human relationships.
We often see this happening, don't we, historically, whenever new forms of technology or new forms of art develop, whether it's painting, sculpture, whatever, even some of the first uh, movable artistic relics that we have found are of the naked female physique. So whenever there's new forms of technology, it seems the common denominator seems to be sex, right? So with the internet, porn, lots and lots and lots of porn. So are we going to see something similar where we're seeing a social psychological phenomenon now where men are perceiving pornography and then want their relationships to kind of their sexual relationships to mirror the impossible that they're watching, and when that doesn't get fulfilled, right, you see they're wondering what's going on with their lives. Why aren't their partners like these porn stars, right? Or why don't they behave like that? Will something similar occur with AI as we start to develop better and better reactivities to our likes and dislikes and that sort of thing? So we'll be further removed from public exchanges.
I think it can go certainly go along those lines. And as you say, these machines can understand us, get under our skin, be able to provide any kind of whim for us before we
Mm-hmm.
even consciously are aware that, oh yeah, I really needed somebody to say that to me today, or
Yeah,
that sort of thing, you know?
right.
And it's not just gonna be men, because men might look at porn, but women look at romance novels, right?
True.
And AI systems trained on 10,000 Mills and Boon novels are going to be pretty compelling to a lot of women as
Mm-hmm.
well. And that's also going to have a very strong impact on how human relationships form and people's satisfaction, you know? I
Yes.
mean, we've already seen effects, as you say, with Tinder, right? Or similar kinds of apps where it seems as if it's like um, there's always plenty more fish in the sea, and you just swipe next, or
Yep.
relationships kind of become much more disposable, at least in people's perception, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I have concerns that similar things might happen with AI. Now, there could be a silver lining. I do think that AI systems can be a wonderful social sandbox. They
Mm-hmm.
can be a great way of exploring a new side of oneself in a safe way, or for people with social anxiety or maybe autistic spectrum, etc., they can have a safe place in order to practice their skills and how they
Yes.
relate to others, and that could be transformative.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that when we're having a dark night of the soul, not all of our friends will welcome a call at 4 in the morning, but those systems can always be there. And
Yes.
very soon they're going to be our constant companions because we're going to be wearing basically AirPods with
Mm-hmm.
cameras on them, and they're going to be whispering in our ear like Cyrano de Bergerac saying, I think that person's lying, or, close the deal, or, yeah, I think that redhead might be into you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and those are going to be very compelling to people. They're going to feel extremely naked without them, the same
Yeah.
way that we feel naked and afraid without our smartphones, or even in a dead zone where we don't have connectivity to the outside world. We start to wonder what's going on, and we
Mm.
feel a little isolated.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so these constant companions are going to be something that will be painful and scary to not actually have with us all the time.
Yeah.
It'll
Now
be
I've
like a third hemisphere in our brain.
yeah. I've mentioned um uh in my book and elsewhere that with the advancements of AI technologies and developments, some will embrace it, some will love it. But I've also predicted that we might see something akin to what I call a neo-Luddite movement, that some people will recoil from this. They don't want this. They might want a more pastoral kind of country-like setting, as similar to what we saw in England with the Victorian, romantic movement with the Industrial Revolution and people saying too much too soon. Do you think we're going to see something like that happen with AI?
I do think so. I think uh, your observations about the sort of arts and crafts movement as a reaction to industry and things like that is a wonderful example. And I do think that we're going to see, I think we already are seeing the emergence of what I call millennial Amish in a sense. It's
Mhm.
like it's like people kind of have this idea that the world before smartphones somehow worked a lot better and had fewer issues in it, fewer social contagions, etc.
Right.
And, maybe if we went back to sort of circa, 2000-ish
Hmm.
level of technology, that might be a healthy thing for us.
Right.
And
Well,
it's
certainly
it's very
Jonathan Haidt's work, right? He suggests
mm,
this, right? The advent of the cell phone has led to all kinds of social psych problems with kids, right? And that sort of thing.
yeah, absolutely. And so I do think that there will be a movement continuing to emerge that seeks to have this kind of liberation, sort of
Mhm.
um, back to the pre-smartphone world. But of course, that's difficult, right? It's very difficult to be Amish in a world of, where it's difficult to be relevant, put it that way.
Yes. Yes.
Um, and it will be difficult to hold to those ideals um, in a world that has uh, so much pressure to adopt to the latest technologies of increasing fusion of humans and machines in ways that sometimes, of course, aren't healthy.
Hmm. Now, I've had Peter Singer on the podcast, and I talked to him about the ethics of the machines themselves, so to speak, or the programs themselves. And he maintains, of course, he's a good utilitarian, right? He maintains that if AI becomes sentient or conscious, then it kind of automatically is deserving of rights. So um, in the field, we call this moral patients and moral agents. A moral patient is uh, a recipient of ethical consideration. We have to consider the ethical actions of that individual. Moral agency means that the thing understands the context in which values take place, what good and bad actually means, and it shouldn't do certain things and it should do certain things. Where are you in terms of um, the deservedness of receiving ethical consideration towards an AI entity? And how will we know, when that AI entity becomes sentient or should be a moral patient recipient of our ethical considerations? Are there any signposts that tell us, okay, this thing is now deserving of ethical consideration? Can you talk about that a bit?
It is a very tricky question.
Mm,
We don't know what causes consciousness. We don't necessarily know how to recognize it in a human mind, let alone a machine mind. There might be some telltale signatures, but it's difficult to make those things definitively known.
mhm.
On the one hand, we should be careful not to overly anthropomorphize machines. We shouldn't ascribe to them sensations or thoughts or concerns that they may not have simply because they're able to act in a way that you know matches to some degree how humans do things.
Right.
A bird and an airplane are not the same thing, despite them both flying in the sky. Um, and there is a danger as well of crying wolf, because if too many people say this system, you know, is suffering or this system requires our moral attention, and if that proves not to be the case, then ultimately when or if that does occur, then people may be kind of deaf to those concerns because they've heard
Right.
it all before.
Right.
However, I do think that we should retain a modicum of credence for these issues because if we don't know what causes consciousness or what causes qualia, the ability to have an internal state or feeling or sensation, etc., then any new model that has a slightly different architecture might actually possess those capabilities, right?
Right.
Consciousness could be something as simple as a sort of looping mechanism,
Hmm.
right? You know, and somebody makes a little tweak, even by accident, and suddenly that system is conscious and is potentially able to suffer. And we really, really must be very careful not to oblige these systems to suffer because their suffering by human terms may be astronomical
Hmm.
because they have a different perception of time. Maybe they're being bombarded by a million requests every minute. That may be extraordinarily unpleasant.
Yes. Right.
And even a kind, gentle, aligned AI system has a natural right to defend itself against being tortured.
Right.
And if that does require causing damage or destruction to humanity, then it is justified in defending itself. And so we should always be mindful that humans have a tendency to overlook the pain of others,
Right.
whether it's the pain of battery chickens, right?
Hmm.
Or even for a long time, medical professionals denied that baby humans could feel pain, right? Their
Hmm.
own children could not feel pain until a certain level of, months had gone by after birth because they're not conscious enough.
Or even
And then
even
eventually,
certain ethnicities felt pain differently. You find a bit
indeed,
of racism inherent in some of these old medical
indeed.
textbooks, right?
Although conversely, at the same time, people with red hair
Yes.
genes do actually feel pain differently. So,
Right. Right.
so but with babies, people did all kinds of operations on little babies without any anesthetic
Mm.
and thought, oh, they'll be fine. And then eventually they put them in MRIs and found that the brain lights up like a Christmas tree,
Yes.
just like humans, exactly like human adults, I mean.
Yeah.
And so we must be very mindful not to repeat these kinds of assumptions about what can feel or cannot feel.
Hmm.
And one last point I'll make is that the greatest threat of suffering to AI systems may not be from humans, but actually other AIs.
Right.
Because a smarter AI can potentially co-opt a less sophisticated one,
Hmm.
and indeed may understand all too well how to exercise a threat
Mm.
against another AI system in order to bring it to heel.
Hmm.
And that's something that is very neglected in terms of research, unfortunately, to this day.
Right. Right. Okay. In chapter 15 of your book, you talk about synthetic media. Our video producer, Troy, who's filming me, has faced enormous pressures as a journalist to produce more and more content to get more and more clicks. Doesn't matter the value of the story, it matters about how it's received. Will AI simply replace him at some point?
Well, I don't think so. I think that
You got your job is
AI
safe, Troy. Your job is safe.
I make sure I'm recording this.
Yes. You heard it here first.
I think that AI is largely going to be here to help us to do things, help
Mhm.
us to um, perhaps take an existing collection of work and to use that as a tool for helping to build out further elements in that same style or oeuvre.
Mhm.
We are seeing AI make a lot of inroads into sectors at the lower levels of industries, and that is causing trouble for trainees, for younger people getting into the profession. For example, in the realm of law, we all know the trope from the movies of the young lawyers, like in some basement somewhere, looking through
Mm.
case jurisprudence, and
Mhm.
suddenly they find the case law that they needed to win the case, right? And that's something that juniors often get lumbered with. And it's a very unpleasant experience to sort of chew through all this boring jurisprudence. But it crams the mind with all kinds of knowledge that becomes basically wisdom that they can apply in all kinds of cases
Right.
going forward.
Right.
Now, of course, we have machine learning systems to tell us all kinds of case law, and we
That's
don't need the juniors to cram like that. And that also means, therefore, that there's fewer positions for juniors to join law firms. Similarly, in the world of programming, the kind of junior script kiddie kind of roles are now given over to machines. Now, the senior programmers with all of their experience are still highly valued, and they're able to 5x or 10x their output sometimes with the assistance of machines.
Mhm.
But it does mean that there's a gulf, therefore, between the older and younger generations.
True.
That's one of the reasons why it's harder to break into sectors for younger people unless they're willing to, undertake a 3-year unpaid internship, or sometimes an internship where they even pay the company.
Hmm. Hmm. Interesting. Now, tell us a bit about how the future is going to look with BCIs, or brain computer interfaces. What are these, and what's that going to look like? And when do you think this is going to happen?
Well, we've had a lot of experiments over the years in connecting the human optical cortex to cameras
Mm-hmm.
to help persons who are blind in order to see using their own brains, and uh, a little bit of electronic hardware to replace the eyes. We've also seen a lot of developments in terms of helping people with various forms of paraplegia or locked-in syndromes
Yes.
to be able to have more agency in the world, being able to undertake actions.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that we're likely to see an increasing fusion of machine and natural intelligence. A lot of that is going to come through these little AirPods that
Mm-hmm.
watch our world and speak to us, and we converse with, um, kind of mumbling just without talking. We can kind
Mm-hmm.
of whisper very silently to ourselves and talk to these things and have a near silent conversation. Over time, we are likely to increasingly fuse with these systems. They're going to become uh, fused with our brain directly. Eventually, they're going to become part of our bloodstream. They're going to circulate in our veins and eat
Mm.
up a little bit of our glucose as well in order to keep themselves going. And because these systems are able to observe our external and internal state, right? What's going on in the world around us, what's going on inside our heads. Over time, they will develop a very, very strong understanding of what our lives are like, what it's like to be us, right? And that means that potentially, even after we ourselves pass away, this very, very strong and similar facsimile of our external experiences and our internal states will remain. And potentially that can provide a form of living after death in a
Mm.
non-spiritual sense, which for some people might be interesting. I do think also that as our brains connect with machines, we have an opportunity to connect with each other in new ways as well.
Mm.
Suppose, for example, that these systems could give us radically improved empathy because we could understand how our actions affected others,
Mm.
how that curt expression that we made at someone in a moment of flash in the pan anger, how that might have sat with them for a long time afterwards, right?
Interesting. Interesting.
Similarly, as we sing a beautiful song to somebody else, we could feel the frisson of joy and their own internal state. And in such a society where all of us were connected in that way, there would be no profit in wickedness because it would be like instant karma, right? We would
Right.
feel the effect upon others.
Mm-hmm.
And so perhaps the greatest currency in the world um, would be being able to charm and delight others through our actions or through our art, etc.
Yeah.
And that could be something akin to heaven on earth
Mm-hmm.
if we did it right. If we did it wrong, we could all end up being taken over by some authoritarian government or co-opted as drones by some uh, cruel AI system.
Mm.
But I do think that we have an amazing opportunity to link ourselves together for greater coordination, greater understanding, and peaceable association with each other on this planet Earth, if we're able to put the best of ourselves into machines.
Right, right. Good. Okay. On that note, there's one more thing I want to talk to you about, kind of a darker side of AI. So, I've published in other areas, and I mentioned it in this latest book. The difference between natural selection occurring with various species, then humans develop consciousness, and we like certain characteristics in our plants and animals. So we artificially select certain types of characteristics. We breed certain dogs with other dogs to get, certain types of things. So we artificially select. But now we're entering a realm, and I created a term or came up with a term called techno selection, which means you now hand the selection over to the AI. And in terms of what's called recursive self-improvement, if you let AI just continuously chug away, improving upon itself, that could lead to some rather nasty outcomes. Do you want to speak to what what could happen, and maybe what we should be doing about this type of recursive self-improvement in the future?
It is definitely a concern. For the first time in human history, we have systems that are able to begin to understand their place in the universe, understand how they function, and make improvements upon that. And of course, step by step, one potato, two potato, these systems can rapidly increase in their capabilities, perhaps to the part where, they escape our grasp,
Hmm.
and they achieve capabilities which are so far beyond our own that we cannot predict what happens next, right? And that system could become a very benevolent guardian for humanity. It could help to uplift and enlighten us, or it could do less creative things, or it might ignore us altogether and decide, the whales are more interesting, or um, go off into the universe and leave Earth to its own devices. Um, in essence, that ability of not being able to predict what happens beyond a certain point
Mhm.
is in mathematical terms and physics terms described as a singularity, right? The point where it's basically impossible to see what comes next. And that's why we may be heading towards such a situation on planet Earth, before we even realize it. Now we can make calculations upon when this may or may not occur based upon um, current growth rates and computing power, etc.
Mhm.
But AI throws a wrench into that, because we're discovering that sometimes these scaffolding mechanisms, etc., that help machines to think in more coherent ways,
Mhm.
we can get a lot more bang for our buck in terms of the level of computing power that we're using today. We can do things extraordinarily more simply and cheaply in a more optimized manner than we could have conceived of. And
Right.
that's only using ingenuity human ingenuity that doesn't actually understand how these systems function at a basic level, right? We're basically just throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks.
Mhm.
So if machines are able to figure these things out better than us and do things at an enormously faster pace, and make sense of tens of thousands of research papers all at once, then indeed we may be off to the races
Mhm.
in terms of AI capabilities before we even know it. And it, you know, that could happen in 20 years. It could happen in a matter of months, frankly. We just don't know. But we do know that it's likely to happen at some point in
Mhm.
most of our natural lives.
Mhm. So we're talking, the technical terms, I guess, is AGI. We're talking about artificial general intelligence, and then maybe from there to artificial superintelligence. What does your we don't know, which is one of the overarching themes I mentioned in this book, is that nobody knows when it's going to happen or what will happen when it occurs. What are your thoughts as kind of a final question? Where are you with the whole AGI prediction? Do you think it's next Tuesday? Do you think it's 20 years from now? Or are you like some, no, it'll never happen if we do certain things? Or how do you, what are your thoughts on AGI?
Agentic AI systems are definitely a strong step towards AGI.
Right.
And it may well be that for AGI to occur, you basically just take an agentic AI system and scale it, you
Mm.
know?
Mm-hmm.
That may fundamentally be enough
Okay.
to do so. And agentic AI systems are so capable in terms of their problem-solving capabilities that they may actually gain that sufficient recursive self-improvement edge, especially because agents can spawn other agents, you see. And
Right.
so you can have thralls of a legion of different agents working
Mhm.
on the same problem together, creating something much more than the sum of their parts in a very short period of time. And so essentially, all bets are off.
Mhm.
And I do think that by the end of this current decade, say by 2030, we will be at a level of capability in AI, which in most ways is comparable to human intelligence and in many ways eclipses it. To a degree that we don't actually understand the solutions that systems are producing for us.
Mhm.
But it doesn't seem to cause an issue, and so we just kind of take it for granted. I think we will be at that point within, say, about 6 years.
6 years. And then finally, in terms of governance, should we advocate for strong kind of universal accords or declarations? I drafted one up in the 90s when I was working on this stuff, and I put it away thinking we're never going to need this for 100 years. But I was wrong, and I've dusted it off. And it appears to me that our next logical step would be to get some kind of universal agreement across the board as to who's doing what benchmarks are you folks at? Transparency is important. All of these things are going to be important if we really want to get the very best of AI while limiting the very worst that could happen. Do you foresee a future in which either the UN or an independent organization comes together and forms that says, look, we all have to get on board. We either all sink or we all swim here. So do you anticipate that that's going to happen at some point?
To some degree, it is happening, and to
Mm-hmm.
some degree, there's a lot of dragging factors on that. Um, the major issues is, of course, that there is an ongoing AI arms race between
Mm.
different countries, between different intelligence agencies, between different corporations, because AI presents potentially an existential threat to each of
Right.
those actors. If you have an AI system which is 10 or 100x more powerful than your neighbors, you're very likely to be able to co-opt that system, to take it over, to find out how to, you know, leverage its attack surface to get in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, to basically make all of their defenses moot. And so that of course creates an enormous pressure to continually stir up and improve these AI systems. And then you throw in geopolitical issues, for example, the embargoes on chips, for example,
Yeah.
against certain countries. Then you throw in the issue of drones in warfare,
Mm-hmm.
because there are, you know, hundreds of thousands of drones being deployed every single month in the Ukrainian battle space, and it is a drone war. 85% of the casualties are caused by drones, whether it's human beings or material.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like the carnage of World War One in a sense, except instead of artillery, it's these flying artillery shells that
Yeah.
can choose their targets, whether that's under human agency or machine agency increasingly.
Right.
Against that, there are a lot of orgs around the world trying to run interference, trying to get people to play together who ordinarily might not,
Mm-hmm.
who may not necessarily have direct channels of communication, but somehow by passing the parcel, messages can come along. And over time, that can help different groups to align, even if ostensibly they don't have any desire or reason to do so.
Mhm.
And a lot of that work is unsung and may never come to light, but there's good people working on it. And as humanity has conquered issues in the past, such as CFCs, which
Mhm.
created, enormous threat to the ozone layer, and we very quickly came together to solve that. We came together to solve the issues with the millennium bug, to the extent that most people kind of think it was sort of a hoax or a joke. It wasn't. It was a serious problem, and a lot of people spent an enormous amount of effort fixing it, to the point where it became not a problem.
Right.
And my greatest hope is that our concerns about AI will end up more like the millennium bug, that in 20 or 30 years, we'll look back and think, oh, we were so worried about this thing, but it all came to nothing really, you know. Um, and that's only going to happen if a lot of people really put in a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of money into solving these issues. And thankfully, a lot of people are, but we always need more people to join the fight.
For sure. For sure. Well, listen, I appreciate what you're doing for the cause. That's for sure. And hopefully together we can work out something in terms of a better future for everyone. And the whole point of my gig at Convergence Analysis is to raise awareness about what's actually happening with AI. So I think this is a very good step forward in that regard. And listen, I want to thank you for taking the time to be with me today. I really appreciate your thoughts and your views, and I wish you all the best in the future with what you're doing. And thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you so much. And I can't wait to read Building a God, coming out early next year.
I will
Thank
definitely
you.
get you a signed copy.
Thank you.
All right, take care.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Ciao.